Hello, welcome back. So today I'm gonna be doing the video on how I acquired these two vintage Seikos. So this video might be quite long. I was doing a whole bunch of research for them and there's quite a bit of information, so I think I might cut this up into a few parts. So I think for this video I'm going to be concentrating more on this one. So I'm going to take this to the side for now. Alright, so let's start with this. This is the Seiko Lord Matic 5606-5000. It was my first mechanical watch. It was pretty still early in my collecting days, and I wanted an affordable tank style watch that was mechanical. So, you know, as many would do, you start looking into Japanese watches. Initially I didn't want to go into vintage because I read it was such a deep rabbit hole with horror stories. So I looked around for the modern stuff, and I think I landed on either a Orient producer and a Seiko recraft. I'll add in pictures as I go. So both of them had the appeal, like I liked the look of it, but as I did more research on these modern affordable watches, I realized both of them didn't offer hand winding, so like you would need to like spin it around to charge it up. I don't know about you, but like I found that kind of off-putting. So like I actually purchased the Orient producer, I think, and then I canceled it like 2 hours later after thinking about it. It was like 2 a.m. in the morning, so lesson learned. Anyways, like it kind of like had my heart going, wanted something, almost got it, canceled it. So then I started digging really deep into like the rabbit hole of Seiko movement lineage. And then, you know, seeing like old vintage Seiko movements were actually very advanced and very well made, very reliable. So, you know, luckily there's like a huge fan base for Seiko and vintage Seikos. So there's like good documentation and the history of how everything progressed. It gave me some confidence and stepping my toes into vintage Seiko. So I started looking into vintage Seiko, and like I found like a gold mine of rectangular watches from Seiko in the 70s. Guess that shape was pretty popular in that era. So this watch came from the lineage called Lord Matic. It caught my eye because it had like a very well proportioned design for like a tank style watch. It looked very elegant. The line Lord Matic also had very interesting history. The Lord Matic line started in 1968 as the successor to the Seikomatic line, which is more their mid-range line, I believe. The name also takes some lineage from the famous Seiko Lord Marvel, and this line was positioned kind of below the established King Seiko and Grand Seiko line at the time. The feature was like all three of these lines were used the same movement architecture, but it would differ in accuracy and precision standards. So I'll add in a picture. As you can see, the Lord Matic was unregulated, 21,600 bph, and then the King Seiko would be a little higher beat rate, and then the Grand Seiko would be the high beat rate plus the regulation on top. And then below you can see the different variant in the code for date. There's eventually even a dual time one, which only existed in the Lord Matic. My dad used to work in Japan in the 80s, and he told me this like unofficial work culture thing that was going on in Japan, where like you would wear like the kind of appropriate Seiko depending on your job position. So like the junior or the entry staff member would don like a Lord Seiko, senior or management would be like promoted to a King Seiko, and then finally the leaders or executives would be like elevated to a Grand Seiko. So like if a junior member was seen wearing something out of that, like higher end, it may not look good on his year-end report, and it could impact his future outlook. So like, of course, these are just stories, but given how work culture was like in Japan back in the days, I wouldn't be surprised if some company like took that very seriously. You know, my dad said like he worked in Japan in the 80s, and there was a very well defined division among corporate culture. So, you know, many know that the famous Seiko 5 had these 5 rules where it tried to follow. And interestingly, the Lord Matic also had 5 principles it tried to strive for. I'll add in a slide showing you the technical manual for the 1968 Seiko Lord Matic. It's translated via Google, so it may not be completely accurate. You can see that Google translates Lord Matic to Road Matic. But I'll add in the link for the original Japanese website in the description. You can take a look yourself. So some of the pillars, as you can see, it was thinness. It had to have a dual language date, water resistance, reliable, and a quickset. The note about the quickset is kind of interesting. It says there it's the world first date with dual quickset via the crown. So I'm not sure if that's actually true. If anyone knows, just leave that in a comment, because it's quite interesting if that's actually the world first. So yeah, so with these pillars in mind, I think let's talk a little bit about this caliber, which is the Seiko caliber 56 movement. So as you may know, like back in the day, there were 2 Seiko factories competing against each other, the Suwa and the Daini. And although like the 56 movement was positioned as Seiko's high-end movement, so you would think it would be like the descendant from the famous 61 series, but in actuality the texture for this is more similar to Suwa's mid-range 86 series. This was because the 56 in here apply a lot more automation in the assembly line, which, you know, it may not be a bad thing, but for the purists out there, I think the 61 series probably would be more coveted. Main reason was it was during the economic boom in Japan, and Seiko wanted to be able to keep up with the higher demand. So they dropped the high beat that was found in the 61, and then there was also some cost saving measures. So yeah, that's like kind of the flaw in the 56 movement. Some historian also noted that the 51 series from Daini also played some role in the development of the 56 from Suwa. So a lot of people say this movement is kind of like a combination of the 83 and the 51 series. And then over the years, this 56 series would grow and eventually make its way into King Seiko and Grand Seikos. So there's like, I'll add in a picture, there's like a whole bunch of variants. This was a very popular movement in that time, and there's like a staggering 113 different type of case shapes that had this movement in it. The other interesting information was the 56 series was unfortunately the last high-end mechanical movement produced by the Suwa factory due to the quartz revolution. I think, yeah, this came in 68, so quartz revolution was 69, early 70s. So, you know, due to early quartz technology being kind of thick and bulky, this 56 series was able to last until 1978, actually, on the merits of being small and thin. At the time, I think when this was introduced, it was Seiko's thinnest automatic movement, measuring only at 4.25 millimeters. The 83 series from Suwa was 4.8, and the 51 from Daini was 4.98. So yeah, and even though it's very small and thin, it was still like feature packed. It was true and true at a high-end movement at the time. It had automatic winding, and more importantly to me, it also had hand winding. So you could wind it, you don't need to shake it around to make this run. It had hacking seconds, and as I mentioned, it had dual quickset for both day and date. The automatic winding system did not use the Seiko proprietary magic lever system because they wanted to keep the movement thin, so they actually built a fully integrated automatic system into the gear train in order to keep it thin. Another interesting thing is the pallet fork. It's very oddly shaped. I think the reason is because the movement was so small and compact, it had to make it into an odd shape to fit in there. The 56 series also has some unconventional architecture on how the power gets distributed among the gear train. So I'll have to add in a picture to kind of explain it. They designed it so that the minute wheel was on the opposite side of the movement, and then they put the sweeping second wheel in the middle. So in the picture you can see the minute wheel is on the dial side, and the movement center pinion goes all the way up, and it's where the sweep second wheel is. So like in a more classical movement layout, the minute wheel is usually in the center, and it's turned directly by the mainspring, and the second wheel would be offset. And this is why like classic vintage pocket watch or old classic watch, you have a small second placed at 6 or 3 or anywhere, or it could be redirected back to the center. Having this particular architecture, some of the reason was it allowed the second hand, the sweep second hand, to have more even running. But one downside is that it's more difficult to adjust the minute hand so that's always pointing exactly to the minute index perfectly. Some other reason people say is because if they move the minute wheel to the dial side, then on the back side it will have more space to fit a larger balance wheel, allowing more ruggedness. We'll probably get to see the difference when we talk about the King Seiko caliber 52, probably in the next video. So there's this one big flaw that many vintage Seiko collectors will know about in this movement, and it's the notorious date wheel rocker. It's likely due to cost-saving measures. It was a pretty critical calendar component, and it was made out of plastic. So after many years, it would be prone to cracking and breakage. I'll show you a picture in there. So yeah, that was like kind of the common knowledge. But surprisingly, as I did more research, especially on the Japanese forums, it may not be the actual reason, although it could be just Seiko like trying to defend a design flaw. But apparently, Suwa learned some lessons from the previous caliber 61 and 83, and they realized that when the date change was done manually during like the danger zone 9 to 3, and often with a metal rocker wheel, it would produce so much torque that it caused damage to the movement itself due to user error. So they wanted to remedy that by putting in a softer material to allow some slip and produce less torque. So this way, if there was a user error, the plastic can give some slip, allowing the date change to still happen. And at worst case scenario, there is already a weak point along that path, so if a breakage were to happen, it's almost guaranteed to occur at the wheel rocker. So obviously they didn't account for these movements to operate like 40-50 plus years and having like the plastic naturally breaking down, causing like all vintage Seiko collectors like headaches. So I think this single flaw is what put off many potential buyers of King Seiko and Grand Seiko in this lineage. I think a lot of those owners, they would like buy dummy movements from the Lord Matic line to, you know, keep it as spare for that inevitable day. I think that's also why like Lord Matic prices are very reasonable. There's also like a metal replacement part you can find on the seller on eBay that you can put an end to all this hassle. And so this picture here, this is the prices for all the Lord Matics during the era. I don't know how to calculate this with inflation and stuff, but it was still like a reasonable price watch back in the day. Alright, so this specific model, 5606-5000, let's do some measurements and specs. So diameter is 31 millimeter, very, very small. Yeah, 31. And then lug to lug was 37.5. Because of this square shape, I think with the surface area, it wears kind of like a 35 millimeter round watch, but it is definitely still currently my smallest watch. So wrist is 7.5 inch, 19 millimeters, and yeah, it's a little dainty on my wrist. The thickness is only 10 millimeters, and a large portion of it is actually because of this domed acrylic glass. So it's actually very thin. It's supposed to be waterproof, but not with the vintage one, I guess. Power reserve was 47 hours. It ran at 3 Hertz. And this watch came in a few different variants, so I'll add in a picture. There were variants like this one with the stick markers. There's one with the plot markers. some with Roman numerals, gold plated case, and ones were without the Lord Matic moniker. And then the last picture, that's probably this watch's like prime example with the original bracelet, super clean. This watch, when I got it, it came on a bracelet, but it's not the original bracelet. And although it's still Lord Matic, it is not the original. And I think when I got this watch, my purpose was to find like a dress watch, so I just kind of immediately put it on a formal leather strap. The one thing to note, the bracelet design for the gold-plated one and the silver one were not the same. So if you see a gold 5606 5000, the bracelet, when you see those three links, that's the correct one. The silver one had this more retro look. I'm not sure if I like that bracelet that much, to be honest. I think the gold design looked a little better. So there's one interesting variant. I'm not too sure actually. I think it's the international variant because it doesn't have the LM moniker. It was replaced by just automatic under the Seiko logo. These ones also had double markers on position 12, 9, and 6, at least with the stick marker variant. I don't know about the other ones. And jewel count for this movement also was hard to really nail down. Some came in 23, some came in 25. I think most JDM Day-Date variants had the 23 jewel, at least with the stick marker variants. But yeah, most importantly, I think the JDM variant would have the LM moniker, and of course everybody's favorite kanji date wheel. So let me just do some of this operation and see. So on the most outward position, yeah, it should have hacking seconds, and then in the first position you rotate, this is counterclockwise to change the date, and then you rotate clockwise for the day, and I had English and kanji. The dial is a pretty like matte finish blue. If you really zoom in on the macro, you can see like flakes of blue in there, and on certain like very bright days you might be able to see some of the flakes in there. Lord Matic, 23 jewels. I think one of the downside is the markers didn't really have any polish on it, so it didn't really like glitter or anything. It's very subdued, as you'll see in the King Seiko one. That one had very glittery markers. So yeah, that's the case code, movement code. If you know about Seiko serial number, you know this is made in 1971 July. Yeah, the lug width is 20 millimeter, which is I think also what makes this watch wears a little bit bigger. It has like a bigger presence with these larger lugs. Winding this is a little bit, because the crown is pretty small, and winding it sometimes feels a little bit uncomfortable, but it's okay. Like this movement has been serviced, so it's pretty smooth. I don't think this came with any loom, but I'm not too sure. But yeah, this is I guess this will be the first part of this video. Next video I'm gonna go into this one, the King Seiko. Alright, so thank you for watching and stay tuned.